Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. Thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. I have a new guest today, a young guy, a new author. He wrote a book called The Money GPS. His name is David Quintieri. David, thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
You know, we met because we were guests on another show, and I thought, wow, this young guy, he's got this book, The Money GPS, right here. It's a nice big book. And you're just a regular citizen that is so worried about the economy that you wrote a book. And what I like about it is it's not wonky. It's like how to survive this unbelievable historic financial calamity for dummies. How to survive this historical financial calamity for dummies. Would that be a great assertion of, appraisal of your book?
Absolutely, yeah. I started reading Austrian economics, and one book after the other, I'm trying to figure out a way how we can possibly avoid a collapse. And book after book after book, I kept getting more and more evidence that there is no other way out but a collapse. And now I've gone even deeper into that and realized, wait a minute, the collapse isn't coming. We've already begun. And there have been many stages. However, I just see that, okay, this has already started. So if you're not making these preparations now, you've already haven't been preparing, then you're in big trouble.
You know, I had one of the people that is a supporter of the site, and he wrote me an email, and he said he had a question asking. He made a donation to the site, which I don't sell anything but Google ads. So that's it. That's all I got. And he says, well, actually, that's the reason why I like about your site, because you never pitch anything, because I don't pitch anything. And I don't get anything from selling your book, or pitching your book. I don't get any profits. I get nothing. I just think it's very interesting. And I made the same point that if everybody's looking for this one pinnacle point of the collapse, and at this point, it's a process. We've already had the beginning of it. And then when the final collapse happens, the collapse will be over. The process then it'll be the rebuilding process. Where do you think we are right now in the arc of this collapsing cycle that you think we have? Where do you think we are?
It depends on exactly how we're going to look at it. I see it different from financial and different from the geopolitical. But in terms of the financial, they've gone completely overboard. Now they own the economy. There's no semblance of a free market whatsoever. That's completely gone. I believe that there have been a few major points throughout history that everyone by now. I'm
going to interrupt you. When you say there's no semblance of a free market, you mean they're basically rigging LIBOR, they're rigging Treasury market, they're rigging the gold market, they're rigging the stock market. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. The numbers that you see on the TV and the newspapers are completely fraudulent. I stopped looking at all numbers because truthfully, they don't mean anything. They could push the gold price down to zero if they really wanted to. They could push the stock market to 100,000 if they really wanted to. It's all based on what real goods cost. So that's how I like to base my book on, is really the relation to real goods, because that's what really matters. You need to eat. So ultimately, your food price is one of the most important things, not what the Dow Jones is at. So people like to make a big deal that we're making new highs on the Dow Jones. I don't even care to worry about that, because 15,000 on the Dow Jones means nothing to me if I have to go buy a loaf of bread and it's $50. And of course, they forget to include inflation. Even using the fake inflation numbers, we are still way down from where we were in the peak about a decade ago.
Now, you're in Toronto, up in Canada, and you got friends and family. You're a young guy. You're not even 30 years old. And so you are so worried that you write this book, The Money GPS, long, 250, 300-page book. So you put some time into it. You're worried about it. What do your friends and families tell you? What do they tell you? Your friends and your family and people you know. What do they say?
Unfortunately, the ones who actually read it, many of them bought it. Some of them read it. The ones who read it thought, "Wow, you did a great job." But that wasn't the point. The point was a warning. It's saying, "Please prepare." It's a warning. It's a warning message to them. So that was the reason I wrote the book. I wanted to put it together in a proper package to show them, look, I put all this effort in. It took well over a year every single day of my life to put this together, to show you to please prepare. This is serious. We're already gone overboard. We're on the plank. We're walking the plank, and we're right there at that moment. If you're not already prepared, you're going to be in big trouble. And I think a lot of people here in Canada think that the U.S. is somehow distant from us. I always, initially, when they say that, the first thing I say is, Ontario, where I live, 87% of our exports are going to the U.S. So if the U.S. economy is hurting, where do you think, what do you think is going to happen to us here in Ontario? 87% of our exports. But of course they don't look at that. They think that they're somehow shielded.
So where do you think we're, when you say prepare, what are you telling your friends and family to do to prepare? And how do they take your message? First of all, what do they do? What are you telling them to do to prepare?
Depends on who I'm talking to specifically, but I always tell them, if they're invested in some sort of mutual fund, if they're invested in some sort of paper type asset, I tell them to start bringing those back. If they're locked in, I tell them to bring those back in, and when you have that money in your bank account, take it and buy a little bit of gold. Just have that little bit of gold just sitting there. Or I even tell people who are not really into this, I tell them, why don't you buy a nice piece of jewelry instead of having that mutual fund? Even that will be worth something. But the more sophisticated people, I like to tell them to be much more diversified. So I will always tell them to invest in gold and silver. If they can really afford it, I tell them to buy real estate as well, land, anything that holds value over time. I get into that in the book in great detail, but essentially I tell them to buy even junk silver, because at least let's say 10 to 25% of their gold and silver holdings, 10 to 25 in junk silver, that's going to be worth something one day. And not to think about exactly where the price of gold and silver are today, or what the price of a home is. What we need to do is prepare for a collapse. When that collapse happens, those holding real assets are going to be the ones with all the wealth. Gold may be $400, but that may represent a very rich person at that time. So I don't like to look at the numbers at all. And I just try to warn people about the basics, get real assets, get out of cash, because the dollars are collapsing all around the world.
To your point, gold may be $400, but gas may be 40 cents a gallon. I mean, I don't know if it'll go down that low, but who knows? Are you in the inflation camp or the deflation camp, or a little of both?
It looks like they're going the inflation route. I'm going to have to say they could do it either way. Now, the only reason I say they can go in the deflation route, which doesn't appear to be the way they're going with all this money printing all around the world, is when they engage in a deflation, they can use that to hold us hostage. So with the inflation, the hyperinflations, chaos ensues. With the deflation, it's chaos, but in a different sort of way. I think they can sort of see what's going to happen in advance with a deflation, wait for the collapse. Those with the money or holding in real assets can go in, the super elite, they can put their money in, and then they can own every last drop of the economy. So I'm going to have to, if I would have to make a bet, which I'm not a betting man, but if I did, I would say inflation, just because Helicopter Ben has been known to do this. He said in 2002 in his speech that they will print and print and print, bring interest rates down all the way. They've done this so many times before. They're printing, you've talked about it before, but $85 billion a month. Yeah, they're looking like it's going inflation.
Looks like they're going inflation. Is this why I have a friend of mine, one of the guests on this show, he's a friend of mine, Fabian Calvo, and all these big money players spending billions and billions and billions buying tracts of houses. And I guess that's more to your point. I mean, I think if rates go up, housing prices will go down, but you'll still have a house. And that's what you're talking about, real assets. So even if the price of the house goes down, you got a real asset. And it's not like the hypothecation of your brokerage account or the bail-in of your bank account. Do you think all that's happening the hypothecation, rehypothecation, you'll be second in line for your own assets, or your insured deposits, will be held hostage in some sort of, capital controls, and then there'll be a ton of people without insured assets at banks. Is that one of the scenarios you're seeing too? And is that part of the collapse, the final crescendo scenario?
I actually, I would consider myself a bear right now at this point, and I didn't even predict this. They went for the bail-in strategy in Cyprus, actually stealing money from people's accounts. And then the finance minister here in Canada said they would do the same. And then he had to come out and clarify it and say, oh no, it's only for over $100,000, or it's only for uninsured deposits. So there are going to be a lot of people who have over $100,000 or large paper investments. Those are the type of people who are providing jobs, the small business owners. These are the type of people who are really putting people to work here in Canada, and they're going to take that money from them. That's going to bring the economy to its knees. So they're going to go for this. They're going to go money printing all the way, but that money printing doesn't go to the people, it goes to the banks. And then whatever money's left, they're going to do a bail-in with.
And do you think that the people who are feeling pretty smug that have 100,000 Canadian dollars and they think, whoa, I'll get my money, but yet it happened in Cyprus, and I don't think it'll be different there or here in the U.S. or Europe. They're talking about this all over the Western world. That your money's insured. Yeah, I like to have 50,000 of my dollars or 50,000 of my euros, and they say, yeah, you can have 300 today. Do you think there's going to be capital controls? I mean, people aren't really going to get access to their money, or do you think they will?
They're going to do what they've done many times before, and that's a bank holiday. You go to get your money from the bank, and there's a big long lineup, and you need to get your money out, but of course you can't, because they've closed the bank and they're ready to revalue your dollar at a much lower value.
How much time do you have to in closing here, how much time do you think that people have to prepare? Are we getting close? Are we a couple of years away? Or what, are we one Israeli attack, or one Syrian attack on Israel, and an Israeli attack on Syria away from a calamity? Or what do you think we are?
I don't see it happening to be triggered on any one event. The way I see it, and once again, I talk about this in my book, but many different countries are now using their own currencies to trade between each other rather than using the U.S. dollar. I just saw one.
They just announced New Zealand,
yes.
Right?
And that's just one more country. And we had Russia, China, Japan, all the big players here are now going to be using their own. So eventually, there's going to be nothing but the U.S. trading with their own currency. So that's one of the biggest triggers that we have to look for. And I see this happening over time. It's going to happen slowly. It's going to be a slow death. And it's ultimately going to be disastrous. But I don't think the people are going to be wise enough to wake up. That's why I wrote this book.
The Money GPS, David Quintieri, right there. David, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. I hope we have at least a few years, but of course anything can happen at any time, can it?
That's right. I have faith that ultimately we're going to prevail. There's an instinct in us to prevail, and we will.
But for the people who aren't prepared, who are not buying gold, buying silver, reducing their debt, buying real estate, having a place to live, getting out of the markets, that's all the stuff you talk about in your book. Those people are how well do you think those people will do? Well,
not to worry, because Obama's giving out free phones and he's giving out the food stamps, so they're going to have to live under the government's, on their knees, begging to their government, but hopefully more people will wake up before that collapse officially comes in.
All right, David, thank you so much. And once again, The Money GPS is the book. You can get it on Amazon.com. Thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you very much for having me.